On this episode, we're talking aliens tonight, but there's new emphasis on it, I think largely having to do with the Congressional UFO hearings. I was driving over the weekend, and I saw this like silver thing high up in the sky as I'm flying down the parkway. The woman at the heart of this documentary is a woman named by Linda Napolitano, I actually believe is her last name.
Linda has multiple experiences and multiple abductions.
Other people had reported seeing this, with some accounts saying specifically that they saw her floating in the sky. But they had 20 some odd witnesses. Where are we covered like 3 that she could have been. Where's the rest of them? You know, where's the other 18, 19, however was left?
So I think that there's a little bit of bullshit between the both of them there.
Because the way it was going, it was too low to have been an airplane.
I do find it bizarre that you fire 1,400 rounds and then blame that on a weather balloon. But again, they like to not give a lot of answers.
Welcome, dear listeners, to a realm where reality blurs and the unknown takes shape. Tonight we journey through the shadows of our world, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, where whispers of the cosmos echo in the night sky. What secrets lie beyond the stars? Are we truly alone, or have beings from distant galaxies touched our very existence? As we explore the enigma of alien encounters, we'll delve into stories that defy logic and challenge our understanding of the universe. From mysterious abductions to inexplicable aerial phenomena, join us as we unravel the threads of each of these captivating tales, each more bewildering than the last. With a cocktail in hand, let the intrigue wash over you as we venture into the unknown on this episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Mr. Phillips, we are back, baby, better than ever. Cheers. And welcome to our esteemed audience out there to one of our favorite episodes, one of our favorite topics, I should say, that will probably transpire into one of our favorite episodes.
Cocktails and aliens. What are you drinking tonight?
Cocktails and aliens. I was thinking about this as I actually poured my drink, that I'm very boring, and if people are watching these episodes in succession, they're going to realize that I'm drinking the same thing all the time. I am back with Bombay and Club Soda one more time, baby. I enjoy it. What can I say? I was going to go a little crazy tonight and really emphasize the cocktail aspect of this conspiracy show, but this works for me. So, what do you got over there?
Like a little Mars cocktail? Is that what you should have done? Like a little Mars cocktail?
What's a Mars cocktail? Just put like a little green in there? A little Midori or something?
No idea. It's from a show. I have some 1729 bourbon.
Okay.
Not a very highfalutin bourbon. It's the poor man's bourbon, but tastes good to me, my friend.
Okay. And so is this the same bourbon you were drinking the last time?
It was. I couldn't remember the name, but now I know it. 1729.
Now you know it. All right. Well, he enjoys it, folks. So 1729, by all means. We invite you to sponsor our show. Email us at discover@conspiracyrealist.com. We're happy to take in any and each and every one of your sponsorships. And for each of one of you listening out there, click that like and subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube. That follow on X, follow maybe on Spotify, I don't know. Same thing goes for Rumble. You guys know the deal right now. I think it's a follow. It might be a subscribe. I guess it really depends on how you're listening to the show.
Valid.
So we're jumping into aliens tonight.
Yeah.
What?
I was gonna say there's only like four shows that I actually follow on Spotify. So I use it for Rogan, I use it for Tucker, and I use it for Dave Smith, and like that's it. And maybe Tim Dillon. That's it.
That's pretty much became my podcast platform of choice after Google kind of shuttered theirs, which I actually really liked.
I know.
That was a good one. It was just simple, and it always worked. And Spotify doesn't always work. It's not as simple. Yeah. But I do like that I can watch video on Spotify as well. I'm annoyed that not every podcast puts their video episodes on Spotify. I have no idea why that is. If there's like some secret thing that I'm missing out on here, like I don't know why they do that.
Davey Smith, if you know something I don't know, let us know. because I listen to your show on podcast all the time, and I can't watch video.
One of my faves, Chris Van Vliet. If I want to watch the video, I got to put it on YouTube, and they have 12,000 ads. Every 5 seconds, there's an ad. If you don't have like the YouTube Premium, Jimmy Church, who's live streaming it on like every platform. Yeah. It's only audio and spot. I don't understand the difference. Like you could still upload it the same way. So I'm missing the key here. Somebody let us know in the comments. Hey, let us know in the Spotify comments. And actually, while you're there, if you click rate the show on Spotify, that helps us out quite a bit too. A little plug there as well. We're talking aliens tonight. It's a topic near and dear to each of our hearts. We're going to go into some of the more popular ones, kind of spurred by this wave of new alien stuff on Netflix.
It's something we got bored with for a while, I would say. I know I did. I got bored with it, and we've talked about this. It was just the same story regurgitated over and over and over. But to your point, there's been some new stuff coming out.
Oh, maybe not new, but there's new emphasis on it, I think largely having to do with the Congressional UFO hearings. Before we dive into it, just to set the stage, have you ever had an alien experience, encounter, or anything like that?
I haven't. I've always wanted one. But I've never had anything remotely close that I could even say that I saw a UAP or a UFO or a USO or nothing. What about you?
So after we had this conversation about potentially recording this episode, I was driving over the weekend, and I saw this like silver thing high up in the sky as I'm flying down the parkway.
Shut the fuck up.
I swear to Christ. It was the strangest thing. Now, I don't know that it was a UFO, and as a drone owner, although I haven't flown my drone in many years, it didn't quite look like a drone either, but my inclination was probably just like a balloon that got like let off for a birthday.
Yeah.
But it just like the pacing of it and the direction just seemed odd. And it was silver. So like if I wasn't fixated on it, I actually couldn't find it in the sky. Like I had to readjust my eyes, but then I'm like looking up in the sky as I'm trying to drive like 80 down the parkway and nothing came up. So I don't think it was anything, but I thought that was kind of funny and kind of coincidental. I was actually laughing. I was waiting for it to like maybe beam me up. So I had a good story for today.
You know, but for those who don't know, I've known Shane for over 20 years, and we talk every single day of our lives. And he decides to just hold out on this groundbreaking experience that he had until right now, you piece of shit.
Well, you know, it's good for the podcast because it gets us a little bit of a little reactionary there. And I really don't know what it was. I think it was something stupid. Like, I honestly think it was maybe just I don't think it was a plane because usually you can tell those out, but I think it was probably a balloon or maybe somebody's drone or something up there. Just the way it was kind of like sitting. It wasn't moving aggressively in any direction. It was probably something stupid like that.
That's cool. Well, coincidentally enough, I woke up, I think it was this morning I saw this. I have, shout out to New Jersey 101.5. I'm an old man. I listen to talk radio now. I have their app, and so I get the news. And I saw a headline that said, "Panic as drones hover over New Jersey." Now, admittedly, I did click on that link, and it wasn't something that I could read. I had to watch a video, and I just didn't have time to do it. But I wonder... Yeah, it drives me nuts. So I wonder if there was anything... I'm going to have to go back and check that story after this episode.
Could be correlated.
Yeah. All right.
So cool. I do have one other story I'm going to throw at you that you probably never heard before.
Let's go.
When I was somewhere in the ballpark of like 14 to 16 years old, I remember sitting on the back deck of a friend of mine, and we were just hanging out. You know what like 14 and 16-year-olds probably do at that age, just pretend you're doing something really cool. And we saw something kind of zipping through the sky down in Ocean Beach. It was during the summer. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if there was ever a UFO sighting for me, that was probably it, because the way it was going, it was too low to have been an airplane. This is way before the drone era, based on the size of what it looked like. And the story we ended up getting days later was that it was actually Seaside Heights testing out some new ride that would go from Seaside to Point Pleasant, like a little like a low flying aircraft type thing, which did not really, it made sense at the time because I was a young kid and didn't know any better. And as I thought about it over the years, that was it. But that was probably the closest I ever got. I never really got an answer of what that was. It could have just been like maybe a helicopter that we just didn't realize at the time. Could have been anything. Yeah. But that was the only other thing that I could never really explain.
I mean,
we were old enough to know that it wasn't a plane, and it didn't seem like a helicopter, and it didn't have like traditional lights as you'd expect from my memory. And I'd have to ask the other person I was sitting with, Lauren, if you're listening out there, which I sincerely doubt you are, if you remember this story. But
Seaside and Point, I mean, they're close, but for a ride, they're not close enough for a ride.
So I think the idea was that they were going to do. If you ever got gone away, and like you always see, they do those like helicopter tours that like kind of run the coast.
Yeah,
it's like there and back.
They have it down in Myrtle Beach.
So,
yeah,
that's exactly what I was thinking of, like a Myrtle Beach. So I think like that was the premise of what it was supposed to be. It's just like a run across. But we're talking like 11 o'clock at night, so there's no visibility. So that's sort of. Yeah, I saw the bug. Yes, I don't see it every time you're swinging at it, but yeah. Well, you got bright lights on. That's why I'd zip it in there. It could also be an alien bug. Who knows? They're coming in here.
Could be.
But yeah, like, that's where like I've always been kind of curious about that. A little baffled. It was late at night. Never really got an answer on. Never really heard much on it. The story at the time made sense, but never really happened. Nothing really materialized. I didn't get beamed up. Didn't have anything else. I don't know that I classified that as a UFO encounter or an alien experience,
but it was an anomaly.
It was an anomaly. It was something interesting that I can kind of chalk up, and maybe one day when we find out all the answers to our questions, somebody will come back to me and tell me, hey, guess what? That actually was.
You know, I will say that every time that I do see some kind of light in the sky, I do always, you know, as long as I'm like driving or something like that, I do always keep an eye on it for a minute just to just double check. I'm like, let me make sure that that's a plane. Let me make sure that's a helicopter, because I want so badly to see something. But I never have. 37 years, never seen it. So who knows?
Well, when I first bought my drone, you're right, maybe. When I first bought my drone, part of the intent of that was to make people think that it was a UFO. Because the drones, they're quadcopters, so they can kind of maneuver really easily. Now, when I first got it, it really wasn't a popularized thing, so most people had no idea what it was. The problem is it makes like a very loud like buzzing sound, like bees. Bzzz. And so it wasn't as easy to be conspicuous when you're zipping through. And of course, like people I knew I had it. But initially I was zipping the thing over a place, and people were always like, what is that thing? What is that thing? My hope was always that I can kind of spur up like some sort of UFO conversation out of it. Never materialized. People kind of caught on to the drone craze pretty quickly. It got way more popular, way faster than I thought it would ever get.
Yeah, you were an early adopter, though. You did have that early, I remember.
Very early, yeah, man. DJI Phantom 2 Vision Plus. What a phenomenal toy. And I mean, to this day, it probably holds up as a better drone. Very expensive. And I did sink the first one in the ocean, and I immediately went online and bought another one because I was embarrassed. Don't drink and fly your drone at 5 o'clock in the morning after a night out of the bars. Not set it up so that it knows where its go home is.
Well, we live and we learn.
We live and we learn. So we're here largely, you know, you said we kind of got bored from the alien thing, and I think that's very well said. The last probably year and a half, UFOs have become really popular again in the news. We've seen some congressional hearings and stuff, and I don't think we're going to talk too much about that just yet. But Netflix specifically, probably conveniently timed, just released a documentary called Investigation Alien. That's got our old buddy George Knapp, inspiration to I think the both of us. I know me particularly with a lot of this kind of conspiracy stuff in general. And then there's also another documentary on there that's been pretty popular called the Manhattan Alien Abduction. Both covering different aspects. Because it is so fresh on both our minds, and we just literally watched the documentary, I want to start on the Manhattan Alien Abduction, just so we can kind of get out our thoughts on that. So for those who haven't watched this on Netflix, I don't think I'm spoiling anything for you, just because it happened in the 80s. So
you could pretty much figure it out.
You can pretty much figure out what's going on. We're going to talk about it here. If you haven't watched the documentary and you don't want to know what happened because you think it's going to be something groundbreaking, by all means, skip this part. Maybe skip 5 minutes. Don't leave the whole episode. But for the rest of you, hopefully you're caught up and you understand what's going on. But here we go. That's your spoiler alert. So in the 1980s, there was a bunch of reports that emerged from Manhattan, New York City, about individuals claiming to have been abducted by extraterrestrials, aliens, and witnessed described being taken aboard a spacecraft, undergoing medical examinations, and experiencing lost time. The woman at the heart of this documentary is a woman named Linda Napolitano, I actually believe is her last name. And allegedly she was lifted from outside of her Manhattan apartment and was floated up into a giant spacecraft in the middle of the sky. Now, the curious part of this, we've heard thousands of alien stories at this point by so many different people over the years. Some have stuck, some have kind of been chalked up to nothing. What made this one interesting is that it was witnessed by, well, I think they said something between 22 to 25 other people had reported seeing this, with some accounts saying specifically that they saw her floating in the sky. Neighbors were saying that, their power went out briefly, which was reported and I guess checked at that point. And there was like lights coming out. There was illumination from that general area, with most people kind of chalking it up to saying that they were scared. Throughout the documentary, they have interview clips from her son. This is from back in like the 80s and whatnot.
Yeah.
Who also describes walking out into the living room and seeing these gray beings like approaching her mother, who's effectively frozen there, and then kind of losing his own consciousness. At the time, she links up with a guy named Bud Thompson. And Bud is effectively the Ed and Lorraine Warren of UFOs in the 1980s, for those that are into our ghost episode and not too up for the UFOs. He would later become, the inspiration to a lot of the other guys like Peter Robbins and, a lot of the other big ufologists that have come through. Actually, Peter Robbins was his assistant at the time. And so, Bud was kind of, like I said, Ed and Lorraine Warren, kind of breaking open the mold for everybody, showing all these stories. And of course, this Linda story is the most captivating because it's got probably the most credibility to it, allows him to kind of position book deals, tries to get movie deals, show deals, all this other stuff. They go on interview tours. It's 1980, so people are largely laughed at. But this is kind of one of those things that starts to break the mold a little bit. Now, going into the documentary, it's framed where Linda is positioning one side of the story, and then another woman, I can't remember her name.
Carol.
What's her name, Tim? Carol.
Carol. I don't know her last name, but her name is Carol, which at that time was Bud's wife.
It was Bud's wife, yeah. They were really weird about the way they positioned names in the documentary, which drove me crazy. They only showed it like one time at the beginning of the episode. Like, I hated that.
By the time I got to like episode 3, and it was like, because they talked to a lot of people, I'm like, who the fuck is this person? Like, can I see their name again, please? Mm-hmm. Granted, I binged it all in one night, but it was enough that I forgot who some of these people were by name.
Oh my god, dude! It was it's the most annoying thing to be possible. Like, you should put the name up like every like quarter hour in a documentary. Note to everybody, right? That's going to make documentaries. So Carol is Bud's wife. She's basically a filmmaker. At this particular point, she's just like really into like documenting everything that's going on. Bud's a hypnotist as well, does regressions to try to get more information out of the alien encounters, and Carol's now documenting this whole thing. But in the documentary that we're watching here, not Carol's, Carol is basically going back at Linda and suggesting that she's full of shit. She made this stuff all up. This isn't real. And she kind of, the whole 3-episode series sort of pits them both against each other on the stories. So before we dive into the nitty gritty of this, Tim, true or false? Do you think this happened?
I'm going to call it a half-truth. Half-truth.
Why?
So, if you watch the documentary, Linda has multiple experiences and multiple abductions, okay? I think that it's plausible that she had one prior to meeting Bud. I do think that everything after Bud was probably bullshit.
Mm-hmm. You think she was just trying to milk it?
I think she was trying to milk it. And there was one big thing that stood out for me. At a certain point, I couldn't tell you what episode it is. She talks about... Now, you mentioned that Bud was a hypnotist. He would put people into regressions. She talked about how Bud had kind of given an explanation as to why he believed that this was going on, why they were here, why they were abducting people, why she was abducted. Mm-hmm. Then, she says he puts her in a regression, and suddenly she remembers all of it. To me, that's Bud leading her to believe what he wants her to believe. So I think that there's a little bit of bullshit between the both of them there. For me.
Right.
That was the big thing. What do you think?
It's... And this is going to be a recurring theme, and I don't think we're going to dissect each and every one of these alien cases one by one for those out listening. So this will be kind of generalized as we jump through. But I think there is a little bit of both with alien encounters. And I do think initially Linda's intentions were pure. She probably had an experience of some sort. And I'll get into what I think those are at the end. And I'll ask your opinion on that as well. I think there was probably more to it. I got the impression in watching the documentary that Carol's issue with Linda probably had less to do with the story and more to do about the relationship with Bud. And it was never really said in the documentary, but in some of like the old footage they showed, Bud was always holding Linda's hand,
holding her
kind
hand,
of caressing her arm, and seemed to really take a liking to her.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that after this initial experience, whatever this experience actually was, those two created a very close-knit relationship, and the excuse to continue that relationship on, they probably realized that they had money on their hands and they needed to continue to have a story to go along with it. And so I agree with you. I think a lot of the stuff that came after, like her getting chased down in police cars or, FBI or, black
whatever
suit
three-letter agency,
cars,
yeah,
whatever agency it was. Yeah, I mean, it was a little ambiguous as to what was actually happening right there. I think a lot of that stuff could have been manufactured, and Carol alludes a lot to that.
Yep.
But I actually think that it was probably a cover for them to spend more time together, because in all likelihood, they were probably sleeping together.
Right.
Is my guess from that. Now, and that's where I think Carol's positioning comes from that. Now, as for the initial encounter, what I struggled with, and this is what I had a hard time finding kind of just in some basic research, and really what I didn't get when walking out of the documentary. Documentary opens up with a bunch of people that said they saw it. One guy's on the bridge, stops, the lights go out, he sees like this body floating up. You get a couple people that say that. There is no follow-up on that. It is a small, like 10-second clip, and there's nothing else. Right. And so I think the case really comes down to that, is who are these people? Are they credible witnesses? What did they see? Because a lot of the counterpoints you get in abductions, outside of what you're talking about with the regressions and working it through, is that, this mass hysteria can kind of influence people to believe they saw something that wasn't there. Sure. So does this story hit the news first, and then a bunch of people see it and they report it? Or do these people see it, report it, and then it hits the news? Like, right. What does that timeline look? And is there any plausibility that these people are just reporting it to be in the news because they read about it and they want to add on to it? Yeah. They did speculate a little bit that some of the letters could have been could have been Linda submitting himself, who experienced the alien abduction.
Yeah, they had a handwriting, a forensic expert on handwriting come in and kind of match the H's and
right.
It's a little shady.
I can always go both ways with that. Sometimes handwriting is what it is, especially at a time when everyone was using cursive writing. You were taught to write a certain way. I'm not too sold on that. I do think she probably embellished to kind of push the narrative a little bit further. I don't think that's out of the question at all. But they had 20 some odd witnesses. Where are we covered like 3 that she could have been. Where's the rest of them? Where's the other 18, 19, however was left?
I thought that they did a very poor job on the follow-up of that. And to your point, it opens with that, which hooks you, right? I was like, from the beginning, I was like, holy shit, this is pretty interesting, right? They had over 20 people witness this, and I really thought we were going to get some good footage of the witnesses' stories, and it was just nothing. Absolutely nothing, which I thought was pretty odd.
It was odd. It almost felt like the documentary was built to just show this rivalry with the subtext of a cheating wife and a cheating husband. And like Linda was married too. Her husband was basically a nominal part of this whole thing. Like that's what it felt like it was, like this. And I was just waiting for that to come out at the end. And I was just like, it finished, and I felt very underwhelmed with it for a story that, as we pointed out before, I really didn't. I think I might have heard about it, but it was not fresh enough on my mind. I wasn't familiar enough with it to really say like what it was. So this is a new story for us, and it just felt like, I felt like I didn't get much out of it.
Yeah, I was in the very beginning, as I alluded to earlier, with Linda's first experience, which was not in the city. I don't remember exactly where it was. Maybe someplace upstate in the Catskills. I could be getting that wrong, but it was. I believe they were vacationing somewhere. Her and her husband.
Yeah, it was the Catskills.
It was the Catskills, right? And she talks about her first abduction experience, and you remember the whole thing with her nose, right? So she woke up. She then realized she had a bump on her nose. She goes to the doctor. They wind up doing an X-ray, right? They do an X-ray on her nose, and they find what kind of looks like a little spring, right? That's been lodged into her nose, and the doctor says that she has a scar in there. And initially, I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. Imagine waking up and you have a fucking little spring in your nose. Like, how did it get there? Now, I want to ask your opinion on this. I'll tell you how I feel about that. What were your thoughts about that? Did you feel like that was like a big aha moment? Were you like, what was your thought about that?
I definitely thought that was really interesting. Of course, she could have been lying that she did have some sort of surgery previously. Why would you? Don't know. But I think that was very true. I think the argument that Linda had that you could just like tape something to your side of the nose and take an X-ray is bullshit.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Right. Well, for two reasons. Like when you go into an X-ray room, they make you take off all your jewelry, right?
Right.
So you're not putting a piece of metal on your nose for one. So maybe it's a piece of string and you're taping it on there. But I would tend to think maybe you'd see the residual of the tapes or something. But again, like you're getting an X-ray. And you're getting an X-ray for a reason. It's not like you can just walk into a medical facility and demand an X-ray. It's not how it works. I'd love to get them all the time.
You need a referral.
It would be great. So you
right.
It's a process to get into that part. There needs to be something going on with you medically to get to be just prescribed that X-ray. After you get the X-ray, you're not just going to be able to like just tape a piece of string to your nose and have it like squiggly. It's unlikely. Is that some sort of an alien device? I don't know. We never really found much out about it. I'm not even sure I know what that squiggly is supposed to be. The documentary filmmaker, it was well produced, but I felt like there's so many threads that were just not pulled on that could either proven or disproven it, and you just sort of left to like not really know how to respond.
So let me follow that with another question. Say that scenario happens to you. You have this bump on your nose. You go and get an X-ray. Oh my God, you've got what appears to be some kind of a metal coil, a transponder, whatever it might be, that's been surgically input to your nose. The doctor specifically says there's scar tissue there, right? Leads you to believe that that's been implanted into your nose. What would be the next thing that you would do?
I mean, my inclination is you'd ask the doctor to remove it.
Get it the fuck out! Get this fucking thing out of my nose!
I thought that's the immediate. That it was.
Maybe I missed that, but that's not what I inferred from there at all. Okay. And if they did, why was there no footage of that? If I woke up tomorrow with a bump on my nose, went and got an X-ray, there was a coil in my nose, and I had somebody take that out, I'd save it forever. I'd never let that thing go. Right. Like, to me, I was blown away. I'm like, how are we not followed up on this thing in her nose? She didn't get this thing removed?
Well, that was what was unclear to me, is because they talked about the scar on the nose, and so I wasn't sure if the X-ray was outlining what the scar was or what the device was within her nose. And then it seemed to be that it was removed because, like, she had the nose surgery and whatnot she talked about. But then, yes, to your point, if they did remove something, where is it? Yeah. We're not gonna show that or display that up.
It was just weird.
A case somewhere. I find it hard to believe you'd throw it away.
Yeah.
And at least not even test it. But yes, there's a lot of holes in that story, and it's hard for me to reconcile whether it was Linda being full of shit or the filmmaker just not really following up on certain threads like she should have, just not asking the right questions, or maybe there wasn't answers, and maybe that's why those pieces were avoided altogether, because it would have kind of exposed her in episode 1. That this doesn't really add up. So
good. Does that be the first question? If I'm making that documentary, that's my first follow-up question. Like, okay, did you get it taken out? Yeah. Did you get it removed? I did. Right. Okay, where is it? Let me see it. Right? Like, you're gonna tell me you threw that thing away? And to your point, that kind of blows everything up on episode 1. So
it blows everything up.
I don't know. Thought that was odd.
Moving on past that, one of the other big ones that we really don't talk about much that was brought into Investigation Alien, and we're going to come back to this Manhattan one a little bit later with some kind of follow-up questions, but I want to tie a few of these together. The Battle of Los Angeles. It was a footnote in a sentence that George Knapp was talking about, and it drove me crazy, because to me, that is arguably one of the most, outside of the Washington D.C. lights, that's one of the craziest stories of all, and you hear nothing on it. Background. Battle of Los Angeles is an event that occurred in the early hours of February 25th, 1942 in Los Angeles, of course, during World War II, and obviously has become a focal point for conspiracy theories. U.S. is on high alert following the attack on Pearl Harbor. The day before this event, a Japanese submarine had surfaced near Santa Barbara and shelled an oil facility, which obviously creates a lot of anxieties. So on that night, air raid sirens start blaring across LA after a radar detects which thought to be an unidentified object approaching the coast. A citywide blackout was ordered and anti-aircraft defenses were mobilized. Between 3 and 4 in the morning, U.S. military forces fired over 1,400 anti-aircraft rounds into the sky at what they believed to be an enemy aircraft or formation. Okay, I'm reading this all if you guys couldn't get. The chaos that ensues afterwards is searchlights are crisscrossing the sky, illuminating an unidentified object or objects that witnesses were describing as large, slow-moving objects, and then multiple smaller lights moving erratically. Civilians reported seeing flying craft, in quotes, of various shapes, and no wreckage is ever found. 1,400 artillery rounds from anti-aircraft. Nothing is ever found. Buildings and vehicles suffered damage, basically from falling shrapnel, and 5 civilians reportedly dead. 3 from heart attacks, and 2 from traffic accidents because of it. So nothing really from the fallout of here. The official explanation, it was a false alarm because of war nerves. Of course, later, the Navy attributes the event to a weather balloon being misidentified as an enemy aircraft, and obviously the official records leave room for interpretation. 1,400 rounds. I want to put some emphasis on that. 1,400 anti-aircraft missiles. These are not like 9mm rounds that you're just kind of pissing off. Like these are missiles that are being fired off with the objective of if one hits an aircraft, it's taking it out of the sky. 1,400 are shot off, and they're saying that it was a weather balloon that they misidentified as a singular enemy aircraft. That they thought 1,400 rounds were required to take out that one aircraft, or weather balloon, as they say. Battle of Los Angeles. How familiar are you with this?
Those pesky weather balloons. So Battle of Los Angeles.
They always seem to be there with UFOs, don't they? Maybe that's what I saw yesterday. Weather balloon.
Yeah, right? It's funny because you and I had that exact same thought when we watched Investigation Alien, and we were like simultaneously, we were like, dude, we got to talk about this. This is a good one. Can't believe they didn't cover it more. I've known about it for a long time. I don't think I've ever done any like further research into it other than just kind of listening to the stories on various different shows. But something I've known about for a long time. I do find it bizarre that you could fire 1,400 rounds and then blame that on a weather balloon. But again, they like to not give a lot of answers.
And the weather balloons always seem to come up. It's definitely one of those ones that have come up for me a lot, and it's one of the ones that I'd love to literally watch a documentary and learn more about. I've never really seen like witness interviews on it. I've never seen like the long docu-series. You get the other ones just beaten to death, and this is what we talked about in the beginning. Like, this bores the shit out of you. Love Betty and Barney Hill, great story. I've heard a couple new things about it over the years, but I've heard the story 12,000 times. The Travis Walton story. I mean, that was relatively new to me a couple years ago. By a couple years ago, probably like 5 to 10 years ago, I knew enough about it, but being able to watch some of the documentaries, hear him talk about it, again, very interesting, very convincing, but beaten to death. Roswell's a punchline at this point. It doesn't even matter. Yeah. But there's so many, like, when you have an event that's at that scale, when you have an event like a Walton or a Betty and Barney Hill, there's nobody else really around to lend credence to that event. It's one-on-one effectively, or two-on-one, right? And so you're kind of taking those people at their word. When you have something like the Battle of Los Angeles, all of a sudden, like, you've got a city full of people. Granted, it's in World War II, so I know there's a lot of explanation that can go on there, but there's a city full of people. Nobody at any point in time, I guess I don't know how big ufology was at that point, but nobody thought to like compile all these. Like, there's nobody around from World War II that lived in Los Angeles over the last 20 years that you could have interviewed about this stuff. That to me is Roswell? Weird. Oh gosh,
I'm looking it up.
Are you looking it up?
Yeah.
You're taking a while there, bud.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to type slowly. All right, so Roswell was 1947, so that was 5 years after the Battle of Los Angeles, right? And to your point, the reason why I bring that up is, how big was the UFO phenomenon pre-Roswell? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. We all kind of know, I mean, at least for me anyway, like, that kind of kicks everything off in terms of modern ufology. Was like Roswell. That was kind of like, boom, the big bang, if you will, of the modern UFO era. So I don't know how big it was back then. You know what I mean? And also, I think you got to take into account, right? This was 1942, right? I mean, how many witnesses are alive today? It's 2024. Not to say that a documentary couldn't have been made 20 years ago.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, these interviews that would have happened. Like, you take a George Knapp, for example, who was reporting on UFOs for many years when Bob Lazar first came out. Yeah, right. So nobody like grabbed anybody that was around Los Angeles. I mean, Roswell's been interviewed to death. You got just about, with the exception of the initial people that were involved in that, I mean, you got a lot of people that were talking about it. it's not like, again, like a Roswell incident where a single person could have been threatened. We're talking about an entire city. And it's just, maybe this stuff exists out there. I'm just not familiar with it, but it's always struck me as odd. Parlaying that, the one in Washington, D.C., effectively a very similar concept, just no artillery is fired off.
Yeah.
July 1952, Washington, D.C. experiences a series of unexplained aerial phenomena, UAPs. Isn't that an interesting coin of phrase? That have since become a significant chapter in USA UFO history. Over consecutive weekends, radar operators at Washington National Airport, which is now Ronald Reagan National Airport, and Andrews Air Force Base detected UFOs moving at extraordinary speeds and performing maneuvers beyond the capabilities of known aircraft at the time. The radar sightings were corroborated by visual observations by both pilots and people on the ground. Again, you've got witnesses that are seeing these things, these lights zipping over Washington, D.C., which is not a very big area, especially when you compare it to Los Angeles. Like Los Angeles, I guess it kind of makes sense. You got Hollywood there. You got a lot more crazy shit going on there. They ordered a big blackout, so it's very hard to see, very hard not to see what's going on in Los Angeles. Now you're looking at Washington, D.C., very similar thing that happens about 10 years later. Again, we're outside the war at this point, so you can't chalk it up to that. Hysteria is now in full force because Roswell just happened, and we've got our second weather balloon at Roswell. There's no explanation for what happens here. Radar anomalies and just lights. There's nothing else beyond that. Why don't we ever hear more about that?
I don't know. That's an interesting one. You know what I always go back to? I'm gonna contradict myself, but I just want to throw this out there, right? You mentioned that they witnessed the lights moving at incredible speeds, far exceeding the capability of aircraft at the time, right? And so I go back to, my initial thought is, okay, well, today in 2024, with drones and modern fighter jets and so on and so forth, right? We could look back decades prior, 10, 20 years, and say, hey, maybe some of the things that we have today, those drones, the aircraft that we have today, maybe that was the military testing, because we know what we have today, right? Mm-hmm. And so, trust me, I'm going to bring this home. I go back to the 50s, 40s, 50s, and I go, well, clearly they didn't have anything like this, so it had to have been, it absolutely had to have been, some kind of a UFO, a UAP, whatever you want to call it. But then, I think to myself, well, what was the speed and capability at that time, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that it was UFO worthy, right? They didn't have anything like an F-16 fighter jet, right, back then, right? Nothing capable of going those speeds. Today, if we just saw something moving at the speeds of an F-16, we'd go, well, that's just an F-16, right? It is what it is. Hope I'm saying it right. I believe it's an F-16, right? So my point is, my big point is here is that, everybody, I always kind of latch on to it was moving so fast, it was far beyond the capability of the time. But you got to take into account what were they producing at that point in time as well. I don't know.
No, I think we have the superpower of foresight, right? I'm sorry, I guess not of foresight, of hindsight.
Hindsight.
Right. We have the superpower of hindsight. And in that, we can look at our technology today, as you insinuated, and kind of correlate that to 50 years ago or 60, 70 years ago. It really doesn't make a matter. Pick your UFO encounter. And I think that's true. They could have been testing stuff. We would see the technology today. I don't know that the technology today, at least from what is publicly available, even aligns to what that technology was 70 years ago. Right. So that's, to me, why it becomes a little more questionable. And also, the decision, I realize there are Air Force bases in Washington and in LA. I realize there are Air Force bases all over the country. The decision to test aircraft over a major city, in specific the capital of the United States, doesn't add up for me. LA, maybe you had some Navy programs going on there during the war. Maybe. To me, it's unlikely. That's why something like Roswell, to me, was always easy to pass off as a military exercise, because it's in the middle of a Nevada desert. Who's going to see it? Some hick-ass guy that lives in the middle of the desert in a town that nobody's ever heard of and has now since only been put on the map because of an alien encounter. Like the entire town is built for this alien encounter. It's a tourist attraction now. So even if they knew it was fake, the town ain't going to say that because ain't nobody going to come there anymore. But when you're talking about DC, when you're talking about LA, those always intrigue me way more. When you're talking about New York City, and you have 22 people that apparently witnessed this craft lift a woman out of her house or out of her apartment, those to me become very intriguing, because to test military equipment in something that populated, that densely populated, that's got balls, man. Like, somebody's going to see it, and it's not as easy to cover up, because now you've got all these eyewitnesses. And yet here we are. They're all covered up, and there's never been anything talked about, never been anything discussed. Even if it was an enemy at some point, like, you'd think there'd be some degree of evidence.
What if that's the point? But what if that's the point? What if it's some kind of stealth vehicle, right? Take the stealth bomber, for example.
Wasn't that
stealth?
I'm not
claiming, but that's my point, right? So you had 23 some odd witnesses that at least spoke up, going back to the Manhattan alien abduction, right? Manhattan alone, that borough has millions of people. If you're testing some kind of stealth aircraft and only 23 out of 2 million people see it, I don't know, I'm going to chalk that up to a win.
It's a fair point. Fair point. I think I guess it depends. I don't remember exactly where her apartment was. I think it was like outside of Brooklyn, maybe. And what time
they
what
never
time of the night it was.
They didn't say exactly where it was based upon where they kind of showed it on the map. It looked like it was on the East River, like right by the bridge.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point.
Could be. I don't know.
It's
just playing devil's advocate.
I just feel like it's just no. That's a great point. It's a great point to play. I don't know. It's not something I could personally subscribe to. I think it's unlikely. Again, if the witnesses are correct in what they're saying and they're telling the truth, I think it's hard to pin that as a military exercise. I think it's easy to say that, so you can kind of get people off, but you don't want people asking questions, right? Like Roswell, they started asking questions and stuff like that. Do you want to dump fuel on that fire and have people ask more questions when you just told them it was a piece of tinfoil that was floating through the sky? Probably not. And I mean, we see this with government all the time. Like, we did a whole episode on censorship and propaganda. What was the point of that? Is to redirect people away. So by sending things over a major population, you're kind of bringing them back to the root cause. Again, you might be hiding stealth technology, and you might allow people to think that it's aliens. That's all fine and good, but you're also going to get those skeptics that aren't going to buy into the aliens. The media is always crapping for as long as you remember, really until this last year, crapping at anybody with tinfoil hats. And now you're trying to do what when you're sending these things over? You're outright calling these people idiots. You're not going to have more people speak up about them. So you're now giving people the idea that this can't be aliens because aliens is absurd. This has to be technology we don't know about, which then is kind of blowing that cover, right? The whole point of the secret mission. So that's what I've always tried to struggle to reconcile there, and why I've been the most upset with all these people that have dedicated their lives and their careers to all this ufology. And again, maybe it's just that I'm not aware of what's going on. We haven't seen the materials. But the cases that have had the most potential for witnesses seem to have had the least amount of coverage. We harp so much on these individualized stories, which are nearly impossible to prove. And that's my segue. We talked in an episode prior about lucid dreaming. We talked about astral projection and things like that. Have you ever lucid dreamed, or not even lucid dreamed? Have you ever had a very vivid dream that felt like it was real?
Oh, I've definitely had that before, yeah. I've never lucid dreamed, but I've had those, on occasion, super vivid dreams, and you wake up and I'm like, holy shit.
Right, and so sometimes I use those terms kind of interchangeably for me. To distinguish, a lucid dream is being aware in your dream that you are dreaming and that you can control it. And I question how often people are fully aware in the dream and how much they're just controlling it sort of subconsciously and think they're controlling it when they wake up. But so sometimes I'll say, I have a lot of vivid dreams where I'm generally aware in the lucid state that they are dreams, but they are very, very real. Like, sometimes for me, they're continuations. Like, I can have... I'll go into certain dream states, and it's a continuation of a dream that I've been having for years, like as if I'm in another world, another life. And so as I've thought more about the idea of alien encounters to this point, the thought came back up again in watching this Manhattan alien abduction documentary. What if these alien encounters are just that? They're just very vivid dreams that feel real, and they're not. Because most of the time you're getting abducted, when is that? It's not generally, I mean, outside of the Travis Walton, the Betty and Barney Hills, like the big popular stories when they're getting abducted in the middle of, a field somewhere. A lot of the other abductions you hear always tend to be somebody's in bed or they're sleeping. Yep. This is the exact case. You're at home, so you could have been in a dream state. Is it plausible that you're waking up in your dream, in a very vivid dream, and you're walking around your house, or you're waking up in your bed, and you're not actually awake, you're just dreaming that you're awake? Little inception for you there. And you get abducted by aliens.
Yeah.
And then the regressions that are happening are just making you remember the dream.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. What if it's sleep paralysis, right? Have you ever suffered from sleep paralysis or had an experience with it?
I have not, but I had a viewer of ours actually reached out to me. It's a friend that we both mutually share. He was watching the episode that we were talking about with ghosts, with our Ed and Elizabeth Warren Halloween episode that got delayed because of our YouTube ban right there briefly. But he had said, he's like, I actually suffer from sleep paralysis. I've had it multiple times and it's very scary. So it's interesting, but I've never had it personally.
Yeah, so a lot of people that suffer from sleep paralysis or have had an experience with it talk about some kind of a figure that's standing over them. To your point, that sounds very familiar. What does everybody, not everybody, but most people say when they're abducted by aliens, right? They're laying there, they're on some sort of table, and there's a large figure standing over them, performing some kind of procedure on them. Now, granted, the procedure thing is a bit of a, I don't want to call it a stretch, but that's a different part of the story. But a lot of people that suffer from sleep paralysis have that figure that's standing over them. It's very similar.
Well, that could just be, I think they're speculating a lot of the time from what I have heard or what I remember reading or hearing. They're speculating of the operation aspects, right? Like, oh, I'm on a table in a big white room or a big dark room and I can't really see anything else or whatever. But I think they could just be drifting in and out of sleep. I mean, have you ever had your wife bang around the room when she's waking up in the morning because she's loud as shit and you're kind of in a dream and out of a dream and you don't really know what's going on? I've certainly never had that. My wife's an angel. She's very quiet when she wakes up in the morning, but that does happen. And you kind of go in and out of this dream state. And that also helps add to the confusion. So it's something that's kind of sat in the back of my mind. I'm not suggesting that aliens don't exist. I 100% believe they do. And I also believe, I mean, we had somebody on that had an alien encounter, very different than what we're describing right now. And when we walked away from that episode, we talked privately, and I think we might have commented this on another episode. Don't know. It's not going to be big news for anybody else. But we talked privately about, we don't know if he's telling the truth or not about this encounter. We don't know if I'm sorry, I take that back. We don't know if the encounter actually happened.
Yes.
But what we do know is that he is convinced it happened. It happened to him.
Right.
He wasn't making it up in his mind. He was recalling something. What that something is, I don't know. It could all be a figment of his imagination. He admitted that offline. I might just be crazy. He might even admit it on the podcast. It's been so long. But he admitted, I might just be crazy. But as far as I know, this is what happened to me. And it's not something I felt comfortable talking to a lot of people about because they just kind of laughed and ridiculed me. And giving him that opportunity to talk about it was very cathartic for him. It allowed him to kind of get something off his chest, share that story, recollect it, and then question it himself afterwards. And just say, I don't know, but at least I got my story out. And so I wonder in that same vein is if people are having these dreams, and maybe they're not the type of people that do have lucid dreams or vivid dreams often or dream at all. And then they have something that feels really real and it happens to be along this line. How do you feel about that?
No, look, I think that's a very valid point. I can tell you that when I was about, oh God, I'm going to struggle to remember exactly how old I was. I don't know, call it between the ages of 12 and 14. I guess I'm going to call it a dream. I was in bed. To the best of my knowledge, I was sleeping. And it's really tough for me to even go back and really... I don't think... I've never spoken to a single person about this since it happened. It's the very first time. So it's going to be tough for me to even comfortably tell you what happened. Not comfortably, but to really recall it because it was so odd. All I can really say is it was a dream that was so chaotic and random and frightening that I'm now almost 40 and it stuck with me. And there were themes of just dark entities, and I wouldn't necessarily say aliens, but almost something demon-like. It was very odd and unnerving and unsettling, and it wasn't your typical nightmare. It wasn't like I wake up and, oh my god, I just had a nightmare about, X, Y, and Z happening. That's not what it was. I wasn't fully asleep. I was awake enough to know that it was happening, but I couldn't stop it from happening. It's the one and only time that it's ever happened to me. It was very uncomfortable. I pray to God it never happens again. Let's knock on some wood here, my friend. Who knows if whatever that experience... And by the way, I want to put it out there. I'm not saying that this was not an alien encounter, in my opinion, at all in the slightest bit. I have no idea what it was. It was likely just a very bizarre dream. But maybe folks have had encounters or experiences, I should say, like that, and they just attribute it to, something alien, right? Maybe it's because they recently got into UFOs or aliens, or they just recently read a book or watched an interview or a movie about it, and then something like that happens, and they forget that they watched that, movie or read that book, and just, oh my god, I had this alien abduction experience,
Right.
Who knows what it is? Look, the mind is a crazy thing, dude. The mind is a crazy thing. You ask anybody that suffers from anxiety or panic attacks, the mind is a wild thing and can bring you to wild places. To your point earlier, I wholeheartedly believe in aliens. I believe in UFOs. We don't believe in every story. I think an overwhelming majority of them can probably be chalked up to something natural. But who knows, man? It's a weird world.
And I think that's really what's kind of cast that dark cloud over UFOs, UAPs. I guess USOs are coming into popularity now too. Just the whole idea of aliens and extraterrestrials or underwater terrestrials, old ancient civilizations. I think that there's such a mesh of different instances or experiences that sort of all get bundled together. And because there isn't a science that is dedicated towards resolving these issues in a kind of a uniform way, that you allow these stories to sort of run wild, you don't vet through them, and then people start to develop negative connotations with it. Like I think it very could well be distinguished UFO sightings, UFO crashes, and alien abductions. I wouldn't be shocked if we had aliens that came down here and they exposed themselves to us. They've been flying and watching our skies. And, let's just say all the secrets of the world are unlocked. And we find out that nobody's ever been abducted by aliens, ever. It's not happened. And it comes out that it's all just been in their mind. It's all just been sort of a mind trick or something like that. Not going to be totally surprised by that. I think that could be explained away by what we just talked about. Conversely, I think it's also plausible that you say, we've been flying around and we have been abducting people and we have been doing experiments, and sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's accidental, sometimes we just flash people because they're in the wrong time or the wrong place at the wrong time, and they saw something that they shouldn't have saw, so we take them up to try to wipe their brain, jamble it up a little bit. So it's a tough one for me, and I wish that people were more accepting of it over a longer period of time and not just right now. And I kind of wish that even right now, you sort of developed more of a formality in how to assess these situations. Take a Project Blue Book and bring it to the forefront. It doesn't have to necessarily be a government program. And I know there's organizations like MUFON and whatnot out there. I just feel like the incentive is not always to dispel or diagnose what the issue is. It's sort of just to kind of mount it together and make the case for it more. And I don't think that that's what happens. I want to pivot a little bit, though, to the government, kind of bringing that back in a little bit full circle here. And we've had these 2 congressional hearings, and we've had a bevy of guests. The first one introduced the world to Dave Fravor, who's probably been in the UFO world for quite a bit for people that are really deep into it. He's done a lot of talks and stuff, but also to David Grush, who's really been the big one to come out and get a lot of exposure to it. This most recent one featured Lou Elizondo, who's been pretty big in the UFO space for quite some time. And within this the first hearing I thought was a little bit more groundbreaking because it was the very first time he came on there. We're talking about non-human intelligence, blah, blah, blah.
That was the one with Grush.
That was the one with Grush.
Yes.
This one with Elizondo was interesting because they just sort of solidified ideas, and they no longer dispelled the idea that there is something going on. We're not going to tell you what it is. You get kind of puppy fed we'll talk about it in the closed session. Anything good and juicy, we'll talk about that in closed session. But there is something I wanted to point out, which I wanted to get your opinion on because it bothers the hell out of me. Lou goes on to say, and I am completely paraphrasing right here, but something to the effect of, in order for him to come out and write his book, subsequently then come out talking in the congressional hearing and to be out there, he had to sign documentation with a department of the U.S. government not to be named that effectively authorized him to talk about A, B, C, and D, and then he couldn't talk about E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and then he can talk about, Q, R, S, T, U, V, and then not W, X, Y, and Z, right? Like, he had parameters on what he was allowed to say and what he's not allowed to say. Now, I realize he's looked at as a whistleblower, and a lot of the information, the videos he's brought have been great. They've really changed the conversation on UFOs. But is he a whistleblower, or was he given permission to share these things? And if he was given permission, as he said in the congressional hearing that he was given permission, why those videos? Why those stories? And what else aren't we being told? That's what I wanted to get your opinion on. I seriously doubt you watched those 2.5 hours. It's relatively mundane because everyone tries to spit their questions in their rapid fire because each Congress,
they get 5 minutes, right?
Yeah. They get exactly 5 minutes, and if the other person's thinking, they rephrase the question 3 times, holy shit, let them think, and then as they start to give more answers, as soon as they get a yes or no, they just cut them off and go to the next one. Let them elaborate a little bit, because that's what I'm more interested in, the elaboration. I don't want the quick answers. I get it why they're doing it. They wanted to get their talking points in for whatever, their political careers. But nevertheless, I know you have enough from the clips that you might be able to surmise a statement on that.
My problem with... I don't think that anybody... Well, I'll speak for myself. I won't be satisfied until a representative of the government, I don't care what agency it is, comes out on their own and makes statements providing facts about certain cases and things that have occurred and gives us actual answers to them, right? To your point, what really bothers me is you can talk about A, B, and C, but you can't talk about X, Y, and Z. And I understand that there could be good reason for that. Maybe it's issues of national security. There's a million different reasons why that could be, right? But I'm never going to be fully satisfied until, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's a whistleblower. I don't want it to be a whistleblower. I want a government official to come out and make a statement and state that, hey, this is what we know. This is what we don't know, right? Granted, I think that, and listen, we're called the conspiracy realist for a reason. It's 2024. I think more people now than ever have distrust in the government. So I take that with more than just a grain of salt. I take it with a mountain of salt. But it just doesn't satisfy me, and it irritates me.
I mean, we've had a lot of whistleblowers. We have whistleblowers coming out all the time, and they're always discredited because when you work in the government, you're not going to be on the front lines. And your name is just generally not going to be known unless you've done something bad or you're coming out as a whistleblower. To me, and I guess what I struggle to sort of wrap my head around with is if you're going to authorize a bunch of videos to be released, there's got to be motivation behind it. If they're true and they are anomalous and they are UFOs and they're extraterrestrials, why wouldn't you just come out and say, yes, we've encountered extraterrestrials?
Right.
That's my point. Known, right. It is known that these videos are real and they were authorized to be released. Now I look at, and we talked about this privately, but it's worth bringing up here. I look at that video of the Jellyfish UFO. To me, that looks like bird shit that got hosed off of a military camera that was just sort of following across. And that's all that is. And that's a perfect explanation as to why that was authorized to be released. Let them think it's a UFO. It's a piece of bird shit on a camera. Like, if they want to think it's a UFO, they're an idiot. Like, that's why it's semi-transparent or translucent. Like, it's bird shit. It's go take some shit and smudge it on your camera and hose it off, or take anything, smudge it on your camera, put a smudge on there, wash it off, and go like that. Like, I mean, to me, it's obvious, right? It's very obvious.
It's quite possibly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. It's the most unimpressive piece of UFO footage I've ever seen.
And you get the arguments, oh, there's so much more to that video, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure there is.
Let me see it.
What? Just more of that? Like, if that's the best part of the video that we're seeing, like, what else are we seeing? Just, 10 more minutes of that bird shit being on the camera? Like, it's going through buildings. It's going through... There's no doubt in my mind that that's nothing. But then you look at the Tic Tac video, which seems like it's something, and that's an encounter that's happening all the time. But again, why not fest? Like, I understand that you're saying that we don't know what it is. But to some degree, I find it extraordinarily hard to believe that at this point, you don't have some glimmer of evidence of extraterrestrial technology. I'm not saying you have to have a body, or that we've ever had a body, but we have to have some technology. Now, was that technology found here, on the moon, on Mars, floating around in space? Don't know. Don't care. But, and I get the I can't even think of the word, Department of Defense argument about it too. You don't want other countries to know that what you have and stuff. That's fine. They don't have to know what you have. But you can still admit, without giving away the dish, that, we know there are aliens. We can't tell you how we know. We can't tell you why we know. That's where I'll pose this question to you.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
If not the president, but let's say, I don't know who the Department of Defense chair is right now, but let's say the director of national intelligence, national security, some figurehead gets on television tomorrow and admits to aliens, admits the United States is aware of alien presence and we have one in our possession, or we have a craft in our possession. Do you think people believe him or her?
I think most people would. I'd want to see it.
What if they don't want to show it to you, but they're just going to give you their word that they have it?
It's tough, right?
You just mentioned that people distrust the government right now more than ever.
Right.
Do you think do you think they would tell you that in an interest of transparency?
Right.
Or do you think there's a motive behind it?
Well, that was my question, but that was going to be my question to you. What do you think would possibly be the motive for coming out and saying that if it was not true? Is it just distraction?
Wow, you had to throw this back at me.
You know what I mean? It's
I think there has to be context behind it. So depending on who is the one coming out and telling me it's true would dictate my response to it. There are certain people in the government, or that will be in the government again, that if they said it, I believe is in the interest of our probably not transparency, but in the interest of national security, because this is something that we should be alert about, we should be aware about. There are other people that said it, or if they said it, I believe it would be a smokescreen, or it would be something else. And that can go a number of different ways, too. You could very well say, we are aware of an alien presence, and maybe they're just very docile beings, and we're going to go take them out because we're positioning them as a threat. We could take them over, kill them, and take over all their technology. And that's why now they want to create hysteria to authorize us to go in. Like we've seen other times. Create a problem, go resolve it, and find out, oops. I mean, where have we seen that before in the past? Right. So that's largely where I would come from. On the whistleblower front, I don't know that there's a single whistleblower out there that could come out and admit to it, with the exception of maybe one or two people that we know personally that work in the military to some capacity that will personally tell us about it. I don't know that I believe anybody else. And I don't know that I take it, because when oh gosh, not Snowden, who's the other guy, the white hair,
Assange,
when Julian Assange set up WikiLeaks and got all these documents, I don't know, and again, we could be misspeaking here, I don't know that there was ever anything that talked about aliens or alien technology.
I don't remember there being, no.
Right. And, on the Snowden side, he was more NSA spying on you stuff. But again, I feel like these are two people that to some degree would have had some access to some other heightened technology. Maybe not so much Snowden, but definitely Assange.
Yeah.
They were leaking war plans. And again, maybe this is just so shut down in these smaller subcontractors that we don't know about it. But
Right.
I feel like
So
that would have been a big
compartmentalized.
exposure. Super compartmentalized. Yeah, great word.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just kind of going back to what you said, depending upon, who in the government comes out and makes that statement, I'd be interested to see what happens on the back page news in the days following that statement. Like, do we give $700 billion more to Ukraine?
Yeah. You're exactly right. Yeah. I've wondered, man. It's something that I think about a lot. The idea of the stories, I think, is lost on me at this point because there's nothing new that comes on. We don't get any new videos, any good ones, and with CGI and AI, it's so easy to make spoofs all the time that even when I see like a UFO video pop up on my feed, I almost never stop and look at it because I usually think in fact, until it's like reported by major news outlets, even though I don't really buy into legacy news, I don't even watch most of the videos that come out because I generally just go in thinking that they're fake. I'd love to find a collection of people that have had more encounters and just be able to talk to them. I'd love to be able to just talk to people off the record, like if they wanted to share their story and don't feel comfortable and get a gauge on that and try to do that, like the work of those investigative reporters to find out, what is happening, how do you summon them, how do you encounter them, what is that process like, and see if there's tie-ins, right? People that don't talk to each other can't have this mass hysteria, but on a grander scale, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, for me, like, I look back at, you just mentioned something that kind of sparked a light bulb in my brain. And, I made a pretty convicting statement earlier when I said, I believe in aliens, I believe in UFOs. And I think for me, it's not even so much of the recent experiences. I think the Tic Tac UFO and Commander Fravor, I think that's probably the most compelling footage that we've seen in modern UFO history. But for me, it goes back to ancient times, right? When you have ancient civilizations that at the point in time should have had no contact with one another, that have the same stories about UFOs or cave drawings about UFOs or aliens or whatever it might be, it's one of two things. Either A, those civilizations did have contact, right? And history has gotten it wrong. Or B, these motherfuckers are real. And for me, that's the big thing that stands out, right? Because take a look at technology today. You just said it yourself. You don't bother to watch these videos anymore. Why? Because they could all be bullshit, right? AI, CGI, right? Anybody can make anything now, right? A 12-year-old kid at a computer is way better than me on a computer. They could make, anybody can make these videos. But when we go back 3, 4, 5, 8, 12,000 years, and you've got cave drawings in the Amazon, and you've got cave drawings in Turkey, and they're both showing the same thing that looks like an alien craft, why do you explain that? That makes no sense to me. To me, that's completely mind-blowing. And I know we're just talking about cave drawings or stories, oral traditions that have been passed down through, generations. But those hold water. To me, that's the big thing. Just wanted to get on a soapbox there for a moment.
That was a great soapbox to be on. I think for me, the ancient alien stuff is just filed in the back of my brain. It's great to think about. I'm pretty convinced that there was ancient technology. I don't disbelieve any of it. Like, I think there was some sort of an ancient civilization, whether it was alien or whether it was Earth being that existed at that point. For me, the fascination comes to modern day because we should be able to prove all these things that have been happening for thousands of years. Like, there's so many of those anomalies that happened in the past. You're right. So we've got this collection of data that we should be able to siphon in. And then all of the little happenings that have happened since. And I'd be more curious to know if we were visited by an extraterrestrial civilization, then why aren't they here now? Would be my first question. And if they are here now, what is like the parameters of their being here? I have a hard time believing that they're just coming to check out people and see what humans are like. It doesn't really make sense because they would have done that thousands of years ago. We probably haven't changed much in those thousands of years, right? Like our genetic makeups isn't changing. So what else is it? Or is it just a new species altogether? Is it a new alien race that's coming here and they passing through?
Who knows how many of them there are?
Well, that becomes a factor too. And, people have dove into that. And some of the people that claim to have had conversations with aliens, they've written books about all the different species and laid them all out. And there are some parallels there. I think a lot of that tends to be influenced by pop culture.
That
a lot
stuff
of those
I have a
parallels.
hard time getting behind. Like, how do you know any of that? How do you know any of
They
that?
have some psychic connection is generally where it's coming from. So
come on.
I think somebody made it up along the lines, and other people kind of bought into it, and their experiences are now influenced by those that that dormant knowledge that's sitting in the back of their brain.
Right.
But that's really why I look at those as two different subjects. Ancient Aliens, no, not to knock the TV show in that regard, but like Ancient Aliens is one topic, Modern Alien is a different one. And I love the show Ancient Aliens. I've watched all those episodes probably 100 times already.
Yep.
It bothers me that we still talk about Ancient Aliens, though. We should be talking about modern aliens. We have in the last 100 years, within our people on Earth's lifetimes, have had experiences that are here. Why aren't we looking into that stuff? Because the ancient stuff, we're never going to be able to prove or disprove that. We're just going to go on hypotheses at this point. We should be able to come to a better conclusion on this one. And for all these people that have all these things, and this person says they talked to this person, they saw this video and that video. This goes with all conspiracy stuff. Release it. I don't understand what the point is in releasing it. Not releasing it and keeping it hidden under lock and key. Telling us, trust me, bro, whenever you come out with a bold statement is not enough for me. And I know it gets people all fired up on Twitter and or X, and people get a lot
certain
of
person
engagement.
It comes to mind when you say "trust me, bro."
There's probably a lot of people. I don't know who specific you're talking about, but it's just it drives me crazy. Like anytime, and it happens all the time. I see it all the time on X. Is engagement farmers. It's like, oh, wait till I drop this great news, and oh, I've got the craziest thing ever, and they never drop anything. Or they give you like some bullshit like piece of crap. Like, I saw the craziest video, you'll never believe it. I can't show it though, or I can't give you any details, but I can confirm that it's all real. Well, you have to be able to give something. And so that's the kind of stuff that bothers me, and why I wish more of these people that have clout, that have money, that have the ins with the investigative reporters, the people like the Linda Moulton House, like, get these people to expose stuff out there, show more tangible evidence. It doesn't all have to be real. We know a lot of it's not going to be real. It doesn't all have to be groundbreaking either, but if you can show the other parts of the Tic Tac video, well, that adds credence to that. If you can bombard more Tic Tacs, bombard the internet with lots more content like that, I think that's my plea to them, because I think that allows us to dissect it better and then determine, okay, well, we know this is real from the government. Now we can extrapolate this out and figure out, how we fit in all the rest of this stuff here. That's my soapbox, Tim.
I like it.
Now I got to take a sip of water because my throat's going to go dry.
Well, I'm going to have some bourbon.
So I guess where I want to kind of bring this home is with a question. Not that I haven't asked you 100 questions tonight, but do you think within our lifetime we will get a definitive answer as to whether or not aliens exist?
Oh, boy, oh, boy.
Not speculative, definitive. And you can define definitive as whatever is definitive for you.
I do not. I don't think so.
Elaborate.
I don't think so. One condition. If the U.S. government, if our government, or a subcontractor of the government has technology that they're working on, alien technology, whether that be an actual UFO or technology that was found within a UFO, doesn't matter what it is. Just call it alien technology. The whole point of them keeping that secret, why, is to keep that in-house, right? It's so that our rivals don't get that information or that technology first, right? I think the only way that we get definitive proof is if we actually reverse engineer that and are able to utilize it, and it's out there and we're now using it. I think that's the only way, right? And not only that, but it's out there to a point where we've got it, we've got the advantage, we've got the upper hand, and we're confident that a China or a Russia or name X, country X, who doesn't like us, can't go ahead and utilize that. I think that's probably the only way that the U.S. government actually comes out and says that. Now, conversely, maybe all that's wrong. Maybe we're not actually trying to reverse, engineer any technology. Maybe we don't have a craft. Maybe we don't have bodies. Maybe we don't have any kind of technology. Maybe we just have these anomalies that are occurring, and the U.S. government just doesn't want to admit it because it kind of makes us look bad, right? Like, there's that whole kind of thought process of, hey, are they just kind of keeping this hush-hush because we've got anomalous aircraft flying that can go wherever they want, they can do whatever they want, and we can't do anything about it, right? Like, that kind of strikes a little bit of fear into the heart of the American people. So maybe that's just it at the end of the day. Maybe it has nothing to do with technology at all, and I'm completely wrong. In that case, there's, at least I would say, maybe a bit of a better chance of them eventually being like, oh, fuck it, like, we just got to tell them. You know what I mean? To your point, maybe we just bombard the space with it so much that they come out and do say something. But I think largely in part, we probably don't, unfortunately. What do you think?
I go back and forth. Probably every single day, because on one hand, I think that why are we arrogant enough to believe that an alien species would come to Earth and decide that the United States of America is the superpower and these are the guys we should talk to? At some points in time, that's true. At other points in time, it's not. And a lot of our power, and I use that, I guess I'm not using real hand quotes, but a lot of that power is perspective.
Sure.
I mean, the people of Russia probably think Russia's the superpower. The people of China certainly think China is. The people of North Korea think North Korea is as well. And so I've often thought I guess on the no side of that is that why would the U.S. be the only ones in contact with aliens? And if other countries had some sort of contact, why haven't one of them had any sort of exposure there? Now they also,
but Mexico showed us bodies. I'm kidding.
Well, those aren't. Listen, they're probably
Mexico showed us movie props.
They're probably disproven, but I'd love to know more about that. That kind of got dropped off. But like Russia and China and North Korea, if they have any contact, they're authoritarian governments. Like, they would align really well with spacefaring civilizations because they're controlling their people. And so maybe they do know and they just don't really care because it's not a democracy. On the other hand of it, I think that we're at a technological brink. I'm a bit of a futurist. And there's a guy named Ray Kurzweil who predicted that probably within our lifetime, and he's a little bit older than you and I would be, about by 20, 30 years. So when he's talking about lifetime, he means ours, not his particularly.
Sure.
That humans will reach the point of transhumanism, to live forever. Now, it might just be outside of our scope. It depends, I guess, how long we live. But effectively what that would be is merging with machine. We would become cyborgs. We're already seeing it with artificial limbs and stem cells and things like that. A lot of this stuff gets curbed off to the side because with Neuralink is another big one. It's a huge one. And there's dozens of companies like Neuralink that are even more advanced than Neuralink is right now. So we're seeing all this stuff and just the idea of being able to replace the human body to a point where it can continue to function. Of course, the brain is obviously a big one, and we can have a whole podcast on this alone, but the idea of transferring your consciousness or transferring your information to a hard drive, more or less, is not a long off thought. And there's shows about it now on Amazon. It's a great show, actually. Of course, that's the other podcast. Is that really you, or is that a copy of you and you're actually dead? So, but to that point is, I think you get to a point where humans reach immortality, and then you have a problem. You have to get off this planet because you can't have immortals on here, which is partly why maybe you get like the New World Orders that want to decrease the population. Maybe it's two reasons. Maybe one, they realize that we're at the point of immortality and they don't want that to go, or maybe they're trying to keep that down and they're trying to get it amongst themselves and they can become gods. But I think once that happens, right, you have no choice but to move off this planet. And I think that there is another civilization out there that is watching us, whether they're under our seas or whether they're up in our skies. I think they're going to have to address that, and then they're going to reach a realization that a lot of your problems go away when you live forever. Because what do you do every day? You're fighting to survive, and you're fighting to make the most of this life. Well, if you have forever, like, what would become the point of a lot of this stuff? As you reach this point of immortality, the ideas of eating and things like that could probably go away. You can take pills and stuff that would give you the nutrients to replenish your system. So all these ideas of this synthetic food and stuff, like, we're fast approaching this future that you see in sci-fi. And so that's the futurist side of my perspective, is that I think that it is plausible if we cross a technological threshold, if we start to merge our bodies with machines actively in a good way, where we're extending our lifespans even by 50 years, 100 years, I think that unlocks the keys to say, like, hey guys, now it's time to move on, because now we got to get people off the planet, or we got to do something different here. But I think that's going to be the way to connect. I also look at people like Elon Musk who want to get on Mars and establish colonies there. You start entering space, you're going to run into people, and it's not just going to be the government. It's going to be it's going to be private contractors. It's going to be harder to cover that kind of stuff up. I look at the new Trump administration now. Trump's got nothing to lose anymore.
Yeah.
He's already had his first term. He's got one term left. He's got nothing else to do except for fight the system. I think this Department of Operational Government Efficiency, or whatever the heck they called it, the doggy department, I think that's going to be an interesting tell, because I think one of two things happens. One, they rip apart a bunch of things in the budget and they expose a lot of secrets that the United States is hiding, and we're all of a sudden going to see a lot of shit come out. Or two, they're going to back off, and you're going to realize that they found something and they were told that, well, you ain't talking about this. Because if you do, you're Dunzo Italiano.
You know,
and I think that'll be a tell on their personality.
If maybe I'm thinking about this incorrectly, right? But we look at the new Trump administration and we look at some of the folks that he's appointed so far, right? But let's just talk about like his close inner circle of folks right now, right? You've got Elon, you've got Vivek, you've got Tulsi. Who else am I forgetting that's very close right now?
RFK.
You got RFK, right? And granted, all of those people are going to be doing something different, and maybe this kind of puts the kibosh on what I'm about to say. But how do you tell a group of people, a group of very high-profile people, you're not talking about this or you're done, right? You can't knock them all off. You can't knock them all off.
They sure can.
I mean,
they can find ways.
Look, you can, short of starting Civil War 2.0. I don't know. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult.
Threats outside of direct knocking him off. I think that's what you'd have to do. And I think some people get bought out. I think you are right, though.
Sure.
You have a very unique group of people because they've come from all walks of life. They're not, philosophically, they were not along the same lines. The only thing they have in common is an urge to strive for the truth. RFK wants to get to the bottom of food. I mean, he's lost so many family members too, so he already has no distrust in the formal government. He wants to get to the bottom of all this health, right? So he is going after that, and he's going to expose secrets there. Tulsi was pinned as a Russian asset. She was put on no-fly lists. Like, she saw the deep state operate against her. She's going to want to expose that, and she's now the director of national intelligence. Like, hello, Matt Gaetz, who I do not like at all. I think he's very weird, but he is now the attorney general, and his whole thing has been trying to go after all of the people that have been going after all of these other people. Yeah. Granted, it's a little bit, pot calling kettle, but he has the opportunity to expose a lot of people. And of course, Elon and Vivek's been Trump's right-hand man, so I think he'll fall in line with a lot of things. But Elon and Vivek, just the idea, Elon's whole thing is that I've been able to improve society in so many ways, and I was stopped by all these regulations and all this political red tape. Our society could be so much better. Why do we keep putting the brakes on it? You want to have a green society, but you're not allowing green companies to thrive. You're actually curbing them. You're stopping them. Why? You're taking patents. You're throwing them away. Things like that. And so I think you have very good points. Like, you've got all these perspectives that are coming in. I think there are ways to quiet them down for sure. Again, without kind of diving off into that tail, assuming that doesn't happen, I think if they unlock the right keys and we do have something to show, I think as soon as 5 years from now, we can be having a real conversation that aliens exist. And we're just talking about how long they've been here and what are they going to do next? Are we communicating with them? Are they showing themselves here? Is it a long-standing relationship? And we really don't have much of a conversation with them anymore. They just kind of check in periodically as passerbys. That's, I think, what the conversation is going to be in 5 years from now.
Well, I have two hopes.
Assuming everything goes well.
I have two hopes. Number one, you and I are still here doing this and we can talk about it. Number two, that it actually happens. Let's see, baby. Let's see. It's going to be a fun 4 years.
I'll throw a hope in there. If it's ready to happen, we'll happily have you a guest on Cocktails and Conspiracies, please.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we'll have plenty of viewers at that time, so it'll make it worth it. But if not, that'll be a great bump to our viewership, which, of course, is the perfect segue for each and every one of you to like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X, Spotify, Rumble. We are everywhere you want to be. Really appreciate everyone that's been joining the channel here. We're fast approaching our 1,000 subscriber mark, so that's super exciting for us. So if you do anybody that's interested in these types of topics, we're kind of all over the place with the topics. If it's conspiracy or it involves drinking, we're kind of on board for it. Please share it with them and just make sure they click that little subscribe button or follow button, whatever it says on the platform they are on. It does help us out, gets us a little closer to be monetized, and make a couple bucks to at least pay for our drinking habits, if nothing else, but at least pay for the time that goes into the podcast stuff here. Outside of that, keep commenting on our channels. We're trying to respond to everybody that comes in there, but we appreciate the engagement and share all your thoughts and what you think about aliens. Are they here? Is it all mumbo jumbo BS? And are we going to see them? Tim, send us home.
Later, baby.
That's it? I thought you were going to give us really big, like a line of wisdom or something to send the crowd out there.
Nope. That's it. That's all I got.
Well, I'm going to give you guys a teaser. We're probably going to take a break over the holidays in December, maybe for a week or two. We'll see how the schedule pans out. We'll come back in January, rip-roaring and ready to go. We'll call that season 2 on there. We're going to try to jazz up the show a little bit, maybe have some new theme music, maybe have some new graphics.
Ooh.
Don't know. We're seeing what's going on there. But until then, raise your glass for mystery. It's Cocktails and Conspiracies. So long, everybody.